Merry meet, guys, and welcome back to Witches of the Moon. I am your Wednesday host, Houston, and this week, week 20, we are talking about our book recommendations. I actually have a ton of books. If you guys follow me on my personal YouTube channel, you know I do a series called The Book Witch, where I review some of my favorite books in paganism and oracle decks and tarot decks, what I feel, what I, review and how I get a sense of them for the Oracle and Tarot decks, and also from the books as well. So today is going to be really cool, or at least tonight will be. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 books. Some of these guys I will go briefly over. Some of them I will go into full in depth because they're some of my favorites. It's kind of hard to pick your books you want to recommend to people when you basically have a library stashed in 2 bags and boxes and things. So I had to go searching for some of my favorite books that I refer back to, which wasn't hard on. The only book I really had to look for was only had to look for one book that I didn't have on hand readily. Everything else was near my altar, near my bookshelf. But without further ado, let's get right into it. So the first book, I think I have done a book witch series on this before on my personal channel, but the first book, it's actually the first book I ever got into paganism, is called Celtic Myth and Magic by Eden McCoy. This is a fantastic book for those who are interested in the Celtic path. This is by no such thing a beginner book. This is not like Wicca 101. This book expects you to know certain basics of magic and ritual that I didn't really know when I first read this book. When I first read this book, I actually got it from Books A Million. My mom bought it for me because all in all, I thought it was a history book. Even though top it does say the World of Magic series, but it was in the history section. So my mom bought it for me, didn't think anything of it, and it's a witchcraft book. So it's kind of like a how-to book. It talks about the Celtic holidays, like the Wheel of the Year. It goes into working invocation, evocation, working with the different deities of the Celtic pantheon. They have sections I have marked off in the book because I use it a lot. Sections of the book that are gods and goddesses and a little bit of their story. Their stories just basically scratch the surface. Eden McCoy wants you to kind of do your own research. She does a little bit for you, trying to get your foot in the door, and then she wants you to kind of bombard through it when you do your own research. They have the Arthurian Night, the Arthurian tales in here. So they have a lot of the Celtic. It's like Irish, Celtic, and Welsh, and Cornish, and Anglo-Celtic are, and there's Breton as well, Continental, and Scottish. Those are kind of like the whole revenue of what they call Celtic deities in here. So in each deity and each god and goddess, or whoever they may be, they have beside them where they originated from, what legend, and how they came to be into being. And then before that, it talks about how to path work with any of the ones in the back, on how you can make your own. There are 2 set ones that are set, that are kind of, my phone's messing with me, I need it to shut off, that are kind of laid out for you. There's one to see Morgan Le Fay, and then there's another one to see Merlin. Those are the 2 that Eden McCoy set out for you to do. And then after those 2, she sets out the basic for you to write out your own, or you to just map it out and meditate and journey with the flow and meet that god or goddess. So I think this is a fantastic book for those who are interested in Celtic magic, Celtic myth and magic, because it is a lot of the history too. There's a lot more of this book than I just talked about. As well, there is another book, almost the same name, called Celtic Magic by DJ Conway. In rating that book versus this book, I would have to say, and I still have Celtic Magic. Celtic Magic is not really a great book, in my opinion. just because it is extremely Wicca oriented, where this isn't as much as it talks about ritual. Well, I can say, okay, yeah, it is a little Wicca 101 oriented, but it talks about a little bit more in depth ritual practices, such as invocation and evocation, the difference between the two, um, the rituals, more in depth, the holidays, um, then more in depth with the gods and goddesses. So this is a fantastic book for anyone interested. It's Celtic Myth and Magic by Eden McCoy, harnessing the power of the gods and goddesses of Celtic mythology. So as you can see, I do have it labeled, and there are highlights in here. I know throughout high school I would sit in class and highlight and read through it. That is a book that I go to all the time. Another book that I go to all the time is, I know people are probably going to bash me because they don't like this author, but this is my personal opinion. I am a huge Silver Ravenwolf fan. So it's Silver Ravenwolf's American Folk Magic Charms, Spells, and Herbals. It's originally called Hexcraft. This is the second edition that was printed out in, I think, I don't want to say anything before the first edition, this is the second edition. It was printed out in 1998. Previous titled Hexcraft, the first edition was first printed out in 1995, I believe. Or, yeah. Or 1956. I think it's 1995. I'm not sure. It could have been 1956, and this was second edition, but I just had the first one. I did originally have Hexcraft, but when I got it in the mail, it was ripped to shreds. That's what I get for buying used on Amazon. Sometimes it works fantastic, sometimes it doesn't. So I sent it back, and I got this same book. This book is basically on the tradition and the practices of powwow practitioners. And for those who don't know powwow, it's kind of like hoodoo, but in a northern territory. This was like around Pennsylvania Dutch magic, Germanic Pennsylvania Dutch, whereas hoodoo is more southern influenced, South Carolina, Florida, Georgia, Louisiana, and parts of North Carolina, and I think the Mississippi as well. Those southern eastern states are well known for hoodoo, and these are more for the Pennsylvania Dutch. So this book talks about a lot of powwow and hoodoo. They're kind of intertwined, except for at least I haven't seen it in my studies of hoodoo, the hex signs, which is why it's called hexcraft, I guess. They'd use hex signs and stuff to bring about love, good fortune, protection, money, well, good fortune, to ward off bad luck, to ward off evil spirits, things like that. That's the only kind of difference I see. Everything else in here is almost like a hoodoo root workbook, except for you don't do, I mean, there's some stuff you do at Crossroads, but there's not a lot. And I still have a lot more studying to do in hoodoo, so I can't be the, dead set on, what is and what is not. But I find this to be, I don't know, I have no idea. This just really spoke to me. A lot of the chants and stuff in here, she changed around to where it's not talking about the Christian god. It is talking about the goddess and the Norns, the deities of fate in the Nordic pantheon, or the Weird Sisters. That's the Weird Sisters, I'm sorry. I think, because the Nine Norns and the Weird Sisters, I believe. I apologize. It's been a long time since I've actually sat down and read the book. I go back through and I read in the back, they have a section of how to use the Psalms and the seals of Solomon. And there are some things in here like how to remove aches and pains, how to stop the blood, and chants like that that I do know that I do use, but I don't need the book for that because I kind of memorized them. So this is a fantastic book if you're interested in powwow. Another great book on powwow is The Long Lost Friend. I actually have a copy of that in my bookcase. That's a fantastic book. It's actually almost a charm in and of itself. I gotta figure out which way my hair's going. It's a charm in and of itself because in the writing it states that whoever holds this book will be protected from all bodily harm and all magical harm, um, and all theft and robbery, and shall not drown or shall not be burned. Um, he shall be protected. Um, that's the charm that's enchanted on the book. So I think every copy kind of has that. So it's a really cool book. It's a very cool book. But that's not one that I'm including today. I wanted to include the American Folk Magic, because that's kind of what got my interest into powwow. It is definitely it's like a beginner and intermediate guide to powwow. It talks about a lot of the healing chants, protection chants. There's some rituals in there as well. And then it goes into herb folklore. It talks about the hex sign, the darker side of powwow, which is hexing, and the malediction practices, and using the Bible and the practice as well. So this is another fantastic book that I recommend, American Folk Magic by Silverine Wolf. So the next book that I learned a lot out of would be, this is going to be kind of funny because on here I don't seem like an angry person. I try not to be. But I found this book to be really helpful, especially when I have my anger bouts. I'm not bipolar or anything like that. I just sometimes get extremely angry. And it's not at stupid people. It's just random bouts of anger, which I'm trying to control. So, but this is Pagan Anger Management, Positive Transformations from Negative Energies by Tammy Sullivan. This is another fantastic book. I know people are thinking, why would you want to change the energy of anger, since it is such a raw and potent energy, and use it into something else? I mean, well, since it is so raw and potent, why not channel that negative? I don't believe anger being negative. Everyone, their emotions, just let them roll. But channeling that energy into something, let's say, is healing. You filter out the anger and use that energy rush into a healing or a protection or a love spell or a money spell, and it'll become extremely powerful. There are ways in here of how to build up that anger energy, and then try to transmutate it into something more on the positive side. So this is a great book. From the back, let's see what it says. Let your anger work for you. It's normal and healthy to experience anger, at least sometimes, but many people lack the ability to cope with this potent emotion. Some allow their anger to take control of their lives. Others let it fester and chip away at their spirit. The truth is, anger can be a very powerful tool for changing your life, if you know how to transform it into positive, raw energy. Written expressively for practicing Wiccan, for the practicing Wiccan, and I'm not Wiccan, but it's a fantastic book though. Pagan Anger Management Magic, Pagan Anger Magic provides techniques that will help you control and channel your anger energy. When harnessed correctly, the power of anger energy can lead to increased creativity and successful pursuits of justice. Pagan Anger Magic is filled with empowering essential information, including the difference between righteous and petty anger, why anger work is not black magic, how to use anger ethically and avoid negative karma cycles, exercises to help you control, recycle, and release your anger, a look at how anger work is connected to many of the classical myths, plus spells and rituals for many occasions. So this is kind of like you're all about how to work with anger. And I know a lot of people, when they think, you shouldn't cast when you're angry, even though it is an amazing time to cast, because you have such raw emotion packed in behind you, because anger is such a raw emotion. I think this book really helps, it helped me channel that anger into something a little bit more positive, unless, you're doing well, even when you do a malediction, you kind of want to be angry, but you don't want to be like seeing blood red. Because you want to be able to think through things clearly and things precisely, so you don't get hurt with the backlash. So you protect yourself from the backlash. I'm not saying that all maledictions come with backlash, because they don't. At least in my experience, they don't. But some of them, if you shotgun them, they kind of will. My experience may not be true for you, but it is for me, so I'm just saying. But this is a fantastic book if you're interested in harnessing anger into raw and positive energy. Um, so now we're on to book 4. I know for a fact I have a Book Witch video on this book, but this is a fantastic book. I go back to it all the time. Protection and Reversal Magic, a Witch's Defense Manual by Jason Miller, the author of Sorcerer's Secrets, which I also have. He's a fantastic book, and he also writes the book. Is it Sorcerer's Success or Rituals of Abundance or something like that? Or it's a financial magic book. Sorcerer's Finances or something like that. It's a finance magic book. Work wealth spells and money spells and things like that. This book is a fantastic book for dealing with anything you need protection from in the magical world and the mundane world. Well, mundane, I mean, like, setting up words and barriers that are powerful enough for people who don't practice to notice, or to think twice before they try to break in your door. Yes, I've had that experience almost happen too. Sorry, I'm better than I was last week, but I still have a lot of sinus drainage, so I apologize. And I'm not a big fan of blow my nose. This is a personal preference, but I apologize. Back to this. So, his big thing in this book is, he says, to make sure that you don't get under, because he talks about psychic attack, he talks about cursing, he talks about reversals, he talks about just canceling out the energy, he talks about warding, and he talks about reversals, throwing it right back at him, and counter curses. He does talk a little bit about counter curses, which is almost like a reversal, but instead you're adding your own twist to their energy and throwing it back at him. His big thing is, he talks mainly about psychic attack, and he says if you want to defend yourself from most psychic attack, there are 3 practices that you should do all the time. It includes meditation. Meditate at least like once to 3 times a week. Doesn't matter how long. I mean, the longer the better. If you're doing it sparsely, like if you're doing it 1 time a week, like 15 to 20 minutes. But if you're doing it like maybe like every day, that would be a bit better idea. Maybe like 5 minutes a day. He talks about meditation, banishing, which he said should be done like every day, or every other day. And that includes your own personal banishment. If you want to create your own way to banish, it could be, this is a little bit different than cleansing, because he's not saying that you should use sage all the time. I mean, you can if you want to, but he's not saying that. He's talking about either using the lesser banishment ritual, the pentagram, or the white light banishing, or chanting the words I am, to raise your vibrations, to banish any kind of lower energies that are around you. And also spiritual offerings. Those are the 3 things that he said you should practice on a daily basis, or an every other day basis. So those 3 things go hand in hand. He said if you do those, you are less likely to get attacked, unless someone is really targeting you. Like, he talks about different psychic attacks where it's direct, indirect, like the evil eye, which is more direct kind of thing. But there's rituals in here. A lot of the rituals in here are based on the goddess Hecate, because that's who his main influence was when he wrote the book. So there are rituals in here that bring on Hecate and her many forms and her guardians to kind of protect you and your property. There's like Hecatean sigils and symbols that he uses. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more about protection magic from a more ceremonial perspective, I really do recommend Protection and Reversal Magic by Jason Miller. And if you want me to, leave me a comment in the comment section below, and I will link my video that I did a more in depth video on this book review. I did a review instead of a recommendation. So the next two kind of go hand in hand, and then the next three go hand in hand as well. So the next two, one is because I think last week we talked about the people that influenced us the most, and Silver Rainwolf, I showed one of her books, and the next book is Creating Circles and Ceremonies by Oberon Zell Ravenheart and his wife, the late Morning Glory Zell Ravenheart. This book is fantastic. If you have not written ritual before, for ritual writing, So this book basically talks about different ways to write ritual. I don't know why that's hard to say. But different ways to write ritual, whether it be a seasonal celebration or a healing ritual, or they mostly talk about seasonal celebrations in this book. I mean, they break it down into each section, like, let's see if I can find it. Yeah. So they have kind of like a outline of what the basic ritual is, starting with the banishment and cleansing, grounding, circle casting, calling in the quarters, calling in the deity, statement of purpose, the working, power raising and releasing, communion, hiatus, which can be meditation, thanks and dismissal of spirits, thanks of spirits and deities, thanking and dismissal of the elements, opening the circle, and that's it. So that's the basic of what they do, of what he goes over in great detail. Each of those sections are gone over in the book. He gives you multiple chants for each one that he has used, and that if he's used with his group of practitioners that he works with, they have kind of all written together and shared. And those that are well known, like Hoof and Horn, that's the only one that comes to mind at the moment. To raise power, the earth, the air, the fire, the water, return, that one. That's in here as well. It just kind of helps you, if you're kind of like stuck in writing ritual. I go back to this all the time when I get stuck, if I'm writing a ritual, just because it's very insightful to see how you can put a twist on things. So this is a fantastic book, especially for those who are just beginning to write ritual. And if you are a little bit more in-depth into writing ritual, like I said, that's a fantastic book. If you're a little bit more in-depth in writing ritual and you want a more in-depth book, I recommend Ritual Craft, Creating Rites for Transformation and Celebration by Amber K. and Azrael Arian K. This is a more in-depth book, more so than this. It talks about ritual on a grander scale, back down to the finer points of ritual, and make sure everything flows together. So it talks about, let me read the back of it, that'll be easier. The ultimate guide to creating great rituals. Why do some rituals leave us awestruck while others leave us bored to tears? Creating and leading effective rituals can be daunting. Ritual Craft helps you to craft powerful and meaningful rituals for yourself, your family, and your spiritual community. As the companion to the popular book Coven Craft, which I also have as well, it's a fantastic book if you are working on getting a coven or getting a group together. Ritual Craft provides a framework for creating your own successful rituals and then shows you how to think outside the circle, with activities that are challenging and unusual, evocative and intelligent. Ritual Craft explores the rites of passage, espits and sabbats, seasonal celebrations, rituals for personal transformation, and rituals simply done for fun. Authors Amber K. and Azrael Arian K. Candlemas and the Heart of Tarot. That's what he wrote, or she wrote. I'm not sure if it's a dude or a girl. So I apologize. It's a woman. Sorry, priestess. She wrote those two. I apologize. I just read at the bottom. Share their vast knowledge of ritual planning and practice, and show you how to change yourself and your world with effective, focused rituals. They explore rituals from many cultures and even share their own experiences, a soul-thrilling success, and even worst bloopers. You'll find information on all aspects of ritual, including correspondences, timing, environment, music, meditation, altars, tools, costumes, mental states, and safety. And this all-inclusive guidebook doesn't stop there. The authors have provided worksheets, outlines, and suggested themes, sample rituals, and a guide to teaching others. Whether you're a beginner or a seasonal practitioner, Ritual Craft will help you take your own rituals to a new level of significance, celebration, and personal transformation. So this is a fantastic book, and I do have to say it does not miss on any of those notes that was noted in the back. It definitely gives you every taste of ritual that you could never even imagine. I mean, some of you probably could, but for me, I found it extremely interesting. At the end of each chapter, they go into Amber and Azrael talk about, either one of them talk about a ritual that they've experienced or they've put on or they were a part of, and they lay out the entire thing, like they've whether it be a blooper, whether they messed up, or it was a fantastic and moving experience, and they write it out in full detail, like almost like you're reading a novel of what they did. It's fantastic, and that's one of my favorite things when authors write stories like that, and kind of like their personal life stories, and with informative books. I don't know why I can't talk tonight. Maybe because it's kind of late. It's not really late, but kind of late. I don't know. So, this is a fantastic book if you're looking into working your own rituals, or writing your own rituals, or maybe you work with a group and you want to kind of spin things up because it's getting kind of boring. It's a fantastic book to recommend, and I definitely recommend this book. Now, I know last season I talked about spirit keeping, and I think the Pagan's Perspective talked about spirit keeping last week. And I know that my spiritual influences, I talked about spirit keeping, and when we talked this season about working with magical entities, I did a great lot of talking about different entities, not just gods and goddesses. So the next 3 books are more on that aspect, and they are part of the Elemental Encyclopedia series. So they are kind of big and kind of bulky, but they are totally worth the money. I did not pay full price for these. I got them on Amazon used, and they came in fantastic condition. But the first one that I go back to all the time is the Encyclopedia of Spirits, the ultimate guide to the magic of fairies, genies, demons, ghosts, gods, and goddesses, by Judica Isles. This is one of my all-time favorite books to do research in. So it talks about different spirits, whether they be deity or whether they be magical entities such as fairies, demons, trickster spirits, genies or jinn, things like that. They go into great detail on those. Kind of. They don't really. They go more so in detail of the gods and goddesses and the different saints. No, they don't talk about archangels. They don't talk about archangels in this one, but they do talk about the different gods and goddesses, and they go to a lot of detail about those. And it's set up kind of like Spirit A to Z. So it's set up in encyclopedia style. So what you'll get is, see if I can find one that's kind of like everyone will know. I want to say that, but then I don't want to. Actually, that's a fantastic one. Okay, so right over here in this corner, if the pages work with me, it might not, it's a big book. It talks about Amaterasu. As you can see, it says also known as Amaterasu Omikami, origin, Japan, and then classification, Kami, which is Japanese for God. Then it goes into a brief history of how she was brought about and what's her story. And then at the end of it, it talks a little bit about the attributes of Amaterasu, which hers are the mirror, sword, jewel, Japan's 3 sacred treasures, also bow and quiver of arrows in case of Susanoo, her brother, just in case he appears again. He's kind of like the mythological bad guy in Japanese folklore. planet. She's associated with the sun, sacred sites, sacred days. There's a tree, flower, and animal, and they see also where she is connected to the other deities in this book. So there's like another list of deities she's connected with. So they do that for each and every one in here. Some has more information, some has less, and that kind of forces you to go outside and go to either the library or the internet and search on your own time and do your own personal research. This video is going to be super long, and I super apologize. Please stay with me. It's 2 more books. The next one, which is fantastic, is the Elemental Encyclopedia of Magical Creatures. I talked a lot in the working with magical beings. I talked a lot about working with like dragons and fairies and unicorns and things that you don't really think about. When you think about working with a spirit, you kind of either think about like the gods and goddesses. You think about maybe working with your ancestors. Well, mostly working with your ancestors. You think about working with the spirits of the land. So fairies are commonly known. There are books on dragon magic, and there are books on the demons and angels. So you think about those. You don't really think about like unicorns, leprechauns. You don't think about. I'm not talking about that one. This is also set up in a A to Z format. They do have some of the gods in here, like Ganesh. I just saw. It's not as detailed as the Encyclopedia of Spirits, whereas, see, this is Ganesh's entry. If I can get it right, and I can't. So there's Ganesh's entry. So it's not that detailed. I think in the other book he has a lot more information about him. So this is kind of like a smaller, it tells you kind of like what the being is and where it's usually found throughout history, throughout folklore. It doesn't really tell you how to work with them or how to get in contact with them, but I think that's up to your imagination and up to your personal interest if you're interested in working with any of the spirits out of here. I do recommend working with, if working with anything, be cautious. Always protect yourself, and because spirits on the astral plane can be extremely tricky and sometimes dangerous. So I just want to warn you against that. But it's always a good thing just to take your guides with you when you don't go, by yourself astrally. That sounds kind of like a really weird parent. Don't go by yourself in dark places, kind of thing. But this is a fantastic book. This is by John and Caitlin Matthews, the ultimate A to Z of fantastic beasts from myth and magic. So this is almost kind of like Harry Potter, but not really. This is kind of like from our folklore, not Harry Potter. So this is also another great book. The last book is for, I got it for my high school interests, because when I was in high school I was extremely interested in vampires and the kind of like the gothic culture. So, and I wanted to recommend this to anyone who is. I got this for maybe, I think less than like 15 bucks on Amazon. So, excuse me, my window's looking at my window. It's the Elemental Encyclopedias of Vampires, an A to Z of the Undead by Teresa Shung. This talks about, not like vampires, it does talk about energy vampires, psychic vampires. It talks about like the sanguine. It talks about different movies that vampires are in, kind of like Dracula. The producers of Dracula, Anne Rice, talks about the authors of vampire books and where the vampire, the idea of the vampire came from. It talks about like the whole A to Z history of the vampire. So if you're interested in vampires and vampire culture, it's a really good book. I'm not going to say it's bad. It's different. It is different. I do have to say it is different, but it's very well written and it's very informative. Just my personal opinion. So I do recommend this if anyone is interested. It's not a bunch of hogwash. So with that, I think I am at like 35 minutes. So with that, I am going to bid you all a farewell for this week. I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. And if you have any comments or questions or want to know anything else about any of the books that I talked about in this video, I know there was a lot, please leave me a comment. Leave me a comment in the comment section. And with that, I bid you all farewell. Many blessings, and see you guys next week.